You may have remembered the green text a couple years ago that was floating around on the internet about the private military corporation guy who busted into a palace of shit, actually. So I'm going to tell a story today about a PMC guy named Jacob who works for a PMC called Yarko. So there are two private military corporations in the United States of America that run. They're called TECO and Yorko. So TECO, as a private military corporation, you hire when you need one or two guys to perform the job that you need to do. TECO, right, right. You perform the job of a couple people at max five. That's the most people TECO usually rents out at max five. Now Yarko, as a corporation, um, rents out 60 to 70 to 80 guys per job. So if you need a job done by a lot of guys, you go to Yarko. If you need a job done by a couple guys, you go to Teco. So let's talk about Jacob, the Yarko guy. Jacob joins Yarko in 1995, of August 1st, 1995. Jacob Smith, his name is Jacob Smith, very, very normal name, joins Yarko. And he is assigned the position of private detective. So Yarko has three kinds of people they hire out. The goons, they really are called the goon squad. The goon squad, the tech squad, and the private detectives. And Jacob becomes a private detective. So the goon squad, you hire out 60, 70 at a time. The tech squad, you hire out for them to use, like, they're the ones who get the javelin missiles and the landmines and the machine guns and stuff. That's the tech squad. If you need some big weaponry, if you need some big guns, you go to the tech squad. Now, Jacob is joining a third branch, the private detective side of Yarko. So he won't actually be going into the field with a lot of men. Anyway, so Jacob joins when he is 22 years old in 1995, August 1st, 1995. And when he's 21, he recently got a degree in criminal justice and spent about 1 year as a police officer before getting totally bored with just sitting there on the highway pointing a speed gun at cars. He was totally fucking bored with that. So he said, I joined the police force to see action. I'm going to see action. So he quits his job in the police force and gets hired by Yarko. So they hand him the private detective badge and say, you've been assigned to become a private detective. So let's talk about his training mission first. So here's what happens. Jacob, about 2 days after he's hired, is shoved into a tiny little room called a test bed, where he has to look around the entire room and try and figure out what happened. And so they ask him the question, you have 1 hour to look at this room. You're going to see what happened there. So, right. Yeah. Anyway, so about an hour later, he walks out of the room and he gives them the correct answer, which is that the wife was not actually the culprit, the brother was. So simple thing. Problem. The problem is that his exam papers get lost somewhere in the whirlwind of paperwork that these people are doing. Yeah, his exam papers get lost, and this matters because 1 week later, Jacob is going to be sent on his first mission as a private detective for Yarko. So Teco also hires out private detectives, but Yarko private detectives are different because Yarko has access to the same crime labs that the U.S. government has access to. As a matter of fact, am I lagging right now? I think I may be lagging right now. You're gonna have to deal with it, people who are watching me. Okay, great. I don't think I'm lagging anymore. Right. Back to the story. So, um, Jacob is sent on his first mission. Well, he's about to be sent on his first mission when all of a sudden his boss calls him into the office and says, by God, Jacob, You have no paperwork regarding your hiring as a private detective. We can't legally make you a private detective until you take that test again. What the problem is that there's only one test inside the room, and the person who makes the test say we're unable to test a person twice in the same room in order to become private detective. So Jacob has a dilemma already. He passed the test once and obviously came up with the right answer, but there's no proof that he did, except for the testimony of the people who work there, which isn't good enough for paperwork. Actually, it's not good enough for paperwork. No, it's not good enough for paperwork. And so his first private detective job is to hunt down and locate his paperwork. So this will give you an idea of what kind of a person he is. So Jacob walks into the office where he remembers turning in. He remembered turning in his paper, and right now it's August 11th. August 11th, 1995. Jacob walks into the office where he remembers turning in his paperwork, and he goes up to the guy who's handling the paperwork and notices that the desk is stacked high with papers. There's like a foot tall paper stacks all over the desk. And he says to the guy behind the desk, who he can barely see behind all the papers, "What the fuck are you doing right now? This is not how you're supposed to run a company." And the guy stands up, gets extremely angry at Jacob, and starts yelling at him, saying, "Fuck you, you fucking bastard. Don't tell you how to fucking do his job." And then the CEO of Yarko just so happens to be walking down the hallway as this paperwork pusher is yelling at the CEO. The CEO goes over to the paperwork pusher, sweeps the papers off of the desk, and says to the guy behind it, "You're fired. You are not managing this correctly." And he turns over to Jacob and says, "I apologize. I believe your paperwork may be in that pile right there." So 3 hours later of searching for his paperwork, Jacob finds his paperwork again and turns it in to the place where he was supposed to turn his paperwork in. And about a day later, he gets his private detective badge. So we'll leave that off right here. August 11th, 1995. There are exactly 351 interesting stories I can tell about Jacob from Yarko. So I hope you'll tune in tomorrow as I tell story number 2 about Jacob from Yarko.